Good afternoon, and welcome to the Transition Readiness series. My name is Patrick Shepard. Thank you very much for joining us today, where we're going to discuss OMB Circular A-123, which deals with enterprise risk management and internal controls. Just a few weeks ago, the Office of Management and Budget released an update to the circular, the first such update since 2004, and there are some important parts of the circular to the ethics community. OGE has been tracking closely the development of the update. We've been attending meetings with OMB and other members of the performance community to sort of keep an eye on things, and we're very excited about some of the outcomes in that circular, in the final product. And we think they provide a lot of good opportunities for us as ethics officials to contribute to the performance management and risk management activities in our agencies, and also present some opportunities to more carefully tailor our ethics program activities to the needs of our agencies. So today we have just a few objectives. I'd like to walk through briefly the circular and the implementing handbook that was put together by GSA and the CFO Council, pointing out some places where there are items of particular interest to the ethics community. And we also want to share with you some next steps, some things that you could be doing in your own programs to contribute to enterprise risk management and internal controls at your agencies, and also some things that you can be on the lookout for that will help you to better implement the elements of the ethics program with a view towards helping to effectively manage the agencies that you provide services to. So we do have a slide deck that we'll get to in just a moment, but first I did have a couple of announcements. The first announcement is that we will be back here next Thursday at noon to discuss the recent updates to Subpart F of the Standards of Conduct. So if you're interested in seeing how Subpart F was updated and having some folks who are involved with that update sharing with you sort of the hows and wheres, we will be here at noon next Thursday to do that. Also, we do have some enterprise risk management strategic foresight activity workshops coming up. One is tomorrow and the other is later on in the month. And you could find the registration information for those in the listserv message you received to register for this class. So if you have an interest in risk management, in the role ethics officials and ethics programs can play in risk management, and you'd like to come over to OGE and work with some colleagues on some strategies that we can implement, please feel free to sign up for those. And if we have an overwhelming response, we can always schedule more workshops as time and space are available. So if you have interest in that, please do think about joining us. Another request, and I'll repeat this at the end as well, is that if anyone is working in an agency that has a mature enterprise risk management program and they're involved as an ethics official, we'd be really interested in learning from your experience. It's our understanding from the performance community that agencies are kind of all over the place with respect to risk management. A number of agencies have already implemented programs because it's a good thing to do and they found it to be effective management. Other agencies are just coming online and will just be starting this summer and fall. So if your agency is one that's more mature and you've been doing enterprise risk management for a while, please get in touch with me because we'd be very interested in any lessons learned or things we could share with our colleagues throughout the community. So you might be wondering, why are we talking about enterprise risk management and an OMB circular as part of our Transition Readiness series? And the answer is a fairly straightforward one. The Office of Management and Budget has encouraged agencies to think about starting a risk portfolio in preparation for the new administration, so that when new leadership come into the government, the career staff will be able to brief them on those things that are the greatest risks for the agency, brief them on steps that are being taken to mitigate those risks. So this is really an area where a little bit of preparation for the new administration is driving some of the timeline. We'll also talk today a little bit about the timeline and the deadlines set forth in the circular, so that you can kind of get a sense of how your agencies are going to be moving along the spectrum. I would also like to remind folks, if you have questions, today we have a smaller group, so if you have a question on the phone, feel free to just take your phone off of mute and shout out. I'll be able to hear you. Those folks on the Hangout, as usual, you should be able to type into the question app in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, because we'd be interested in hearing from you, any sort of things you'd like us to clarify. So with that, I'd like to pull up the deck and we can sort of walk through these two documents with an eye towards areas that are of particular import for the ethics community, and then talk about some things that we can be doing in our agencies to support risk management across the government, and especially kind of next steps over the next weeks and months as agencies begin to prepare. So if you give me just a second, I'll pull up the slide deck. So yes, again, welcome to highlights from OMB circular number A-123, and this is especially for people who are in the ethics area. The first question is, why is this important to us as ethics officials? What is it about the enterprise risk management and internal control circular that provides us unique opportunities? And I think this is an area where it can be helpful to reflect on the work we do as ethics officials, because in many ways we have a lot of practical experience in the area of organizational risk management, going back to sort of the earliest stages of the executive branch ethics program. And on the day-to-day, you might not think of your work as being risk responsive, but I think if you spend some time thinking about the critical elements of our programs, you'll find that risk management is embedded deeply within them. The place I like to start is with our financial disclosure systems. When we look at the public and confidential financial disclosure systems, they are in fact risk-based systems. In the case of our public filers, they're determined by Congress in the Ethics in Government Act to require public financial disclosure filers, and they're the most senior leaders in our organizations. So they do have sort of the greatest risk of possible ethics problems. So we have a robust system to help prevent those issues. When we move over to the confidential system that's implemented through OGE's regulations, the definition of filer is really a very early way of thinking about risk and ethics risk in particular in our organizations. When you all make determinations about who needs to file a confidential report, you look at the duties and responsibilities of the employees and the risk they pose with respect to conflicts of interest and other ethics concerns. So sort of foundational to our programs is this risk determination. And having taught many ethics officials and had workshops talking about filer identification, figuring out who is most at risk can sometimes be a real challenge for ethics officials, as well as finding out what exactly our employees are doing. I think A-123 and the new guidance is going to help us understand the work that our agencies are doing and give us a sense of those areas and programs within the agency that pose the greatest ethics risk so that we can target our ethics activities more effectively. So yeah, thinking about the confidential system, I think it's relatively obvious where the risk determination comes in there. Somewhere you might not think about it so much is in the area of annual ethics training. Our requirements for who should receive annual ethics training refer to the same definitions, the definitions of our financial disclosure filers. So sort of by the transitive property, we find that those people who require annual ethics training are those same people that we've determined have duties that put them at risk for the greatest ethics concerns. So in some ways, our annual ethics training programs are also risk responsive to the programs and operations of our agency. And I suspect anyone who has been involved in an annual training program at an agency will find that the people who attend those training sessions are your most frequent customers when it comes to advice and counsel. So in another sense, our advice and counsel programs are also risk responsive. And what A-123 is going to allow us to do is to see more clearly the risk profiles in our agencies. And we will be able to use that to target our annual ethics training to better complete our financial disclosure reviews, because it'll give us a better sense of the kinds of matters people are working on, and ultimately should encourage those folks that most need our advice to come and seek it. So sort of the short answer to why should we care about A-123 is it's going to help us to strengthen our ethics programs and also to help our ethics programs be more responsive to the needs of our agencies. If you've had an opportunity to look through the the circular and the playbook, you'll find that there are a lot of explanatory graphics, and I'm going to share with you a couple of those in just a minute, all sort of getting to this idea of what is enterprise risk management. What do we mean when we say enterprise risk management? And I've attended a number of meetings and discussions and read a lot of the briefing materials around enterprise risk management. And I think if I had to boil it down to just a handful of words, it's creating a culture within the organization that allows risks to become visible to those senior leaders who need that information to make decisions, and that information should be available across programs and operations and not contained within silos, so that the agency can have a sort of 360-degree view of their own operations and make decisions based on the greatest available visibility of risk and risk mitigation. So I think, when we think of what is enterprise risk management, it's about managing risk, not just up and down programs, but across programs, and thinking about those risks relative to each other. One of the big deliverables that's going to come out of the implementation of A-123 will be these agency risk portfolios. And we'll take a look at some of the advantages of risk portfolios in just a minute. But those are, that's really the outcome. Once we've collected the information about risk across the organization, and by risk we mean all kinds of risk, budget risk, program risk, personnel risk, facilities risk, legal risk, and perhaps most importantly to us as ethics officials, risks to the reputation of the agency. So let's take a look at a couple of those graphics. So here's I think this is the first graphic that appears in A-123, and if you're like me, I find this to be a little intimidating. So it's a sort of complicated diagram, but actually after some reflection, it's a relatively straightforward representation of the risk management process. So we have these sort of two gray circles on the outside, and these represent those externalities, those things in the world that can present obstacles or opportunities for our programs. They can create disruptions to some of the work that we're doing. They can create consequences when risks are realized. They're kind of the greater environment that we're working in. So we have the Congress, the economy, we have resources, administration policy, foreign relations. These are the things that come from outside organizations that can have an effect on our ability to carry out our programs and operations, both positive and negative. I mean, inside in the smaller gray circle, we're talking about kind of those closer stakeholders. They're still external to our organizations, but they also have the ability to affect our implementation of our programs and operations and our mission achievement. So we have other departments and agencies. So for some of you, OGE is going to be an organization that falls in this inner circle. Partner organizations, the extended enterprise, employee bargaining groups, industry associations, etc. So these are the people who are a little bit closer. And then it's within this environment that we actually conduct enterprise risk management. And they've broken it down into 6 steps. The first is to kind of figure out where we are. What is our universe of inputs? Who are we concerned about? Are these the right external partners to be concerned about? Then within that, to identify risks. And I think this is the hard part. The challenge of having program offices, including the ethics program, bring to the table the risks that their programs and operations face, and sort of start to document those things, start to identify the risks. The following step is to analyze and evaluate. So we're going to look at those risks and we're going to try and rank them. And something that is, I think, interesting and effective part of this guidance is that they have not prescribed a specific way of analyzing and evaluating risks. If you look at the playbook in the supplementary material in the appendix, there are a number of different models that can help you to compare disparate risks. There's a 3-step model. So we have risks that are high, medium, or low impact, as well as high, medium, or low probability. And I think this is one we've shared in previous broadcasts. Another model involves 5 categories. It's either a 1, 2, 3, or 5, and then there are also some 10-point scales if you need greater granularity. But the idea is to take steps to analyze the risks to the agency against one another and kind of see, where are the danger spots? Where are the opportunities? Where does the organization face risk? The fourth step is to develop alternatives. Are there things we can do to avoid risk? The fifth step is to respond to risks. Are there things that we can do to mitigate the likelihood of the risks, or to mitigate the impact of the risks if they are to be realized? And I think this is one area where the ethics program can be particularly effective. We have a number of tools available to us that can help to respond to certain kinds of risks. So if we have risks of conflicts of interest, we have our financial disclosure program. If we have risks of other ethics concerns, we have our training and advice and counsel programs. We also have the ability in a narrower sense to analyze issues and decisions for potential appearance concerns. We have a lot of experience as a community working with and balancing the needs of the government to achieve its mission against the possibility that someone will view partiality in the process. So we can bring our experience making those impartiality determinations, and even some of our determinations about waiving the criminal conflict of interest rule under 208B1 and 2, B1 and 3 rather. So we have some experience in this area, responding to risks and balancing the need to execute and carry out the mission, to receive expertise from the outside against the possibility of harm to an agency's reputation. And then the final step is to monitor and review. We want to see how we're doing. We want to periodically look at our risks and see if our response strategies are effective, and if they are effective, or if they're not effective, how we can amend them to be more effective. So that's sort of a complicated diagram, but I think it lays it out kind of nicely. We have basically, we're identifying risks. We're trying to prioritize those risks to decide which we should focus on first. We're looking for alternatives that can help to mitigate the risks. Those that we can't mitigate through alternatives, we're responding to through specific actions. And then we're making sure that our plans are working effectively. So that's kind of the view from 40,000 feet. I think one of the other questions is, how is this going to actually look and work in organizations? Who's going to be involved? And here's another area where the Office of Management and Budget has not prescribed specifically how agencies should sort of manage and staff these operations. But the playbook does provide some framework, some examples of how agencies have or are considering implementing them. And I think it's helpful to maybe take a look at one so we can see the places where we as ethics officials might be able to play a role. So here's a sort of theoretical organizational chart in an organization that has a chief risk officer function. So some agencies will hire chief risk officers. Some agencies already have hired chief risk officers. Some agencies won't because they're too small, or they've determined that a more team-focused approach would be appropriate. But in this case, this is an example of how an agency might implement it. And I think it's helpful to kind of look at this and think about ways we could see the ethics office fitting in. At the top, we have the management council. And these are sort of the senior leaders of the organization. These are the people who are ultimately responsible for making decisions, for the strategic planning, for the budgeting and performance management. We have the senior risk management team. So this is sort of the next level of management, as well as sort of folks in the strategic risk profiling area. So these are regional directors and the like. And again, together, this group manages strategic planning, budgeting, and performance management. And then we have the chief risk officer, and within that working group, we have the risk management team. That's the chief risk officer and core ERM implementation team. And it's not clear, that I think this is maybe the first place we could think of participating as representatives of the ethics office, both as risk owners, because there is certain risk to the organization, certain legal risks that our offices manage, but also as subject matter experts who can provide specific guidance to help mitigate reputational risks and the legal risks that we work to manage within our organization. And then sort of in the bottom tier, we have the risk identifiers and treatment managers. So these are the people who are actually implementing these things. So we might think of these folks in our world as the folks who participate in supervisory reviews of confidential financial disclosure reports, or people who might invite us in for special training that's responsive to projects and programs in their organizations, or the people who help us issue spot and send employees in for guidance. But these people will be helping to manage risks across their programs. So this is kind of one way that an agency might, but I think the functionally, it's very helpful for us as ethics officials, because one of the things we can help to do is identify risks. And another thing we can do is use our special expertise to help the organization address those risks. And the challenge for us is to figure out how best to participate in the programs at our agencies. And if you're interested in some of the other models, there are a number of different schematics in the playbook of ways that agencies have addressed this, and there might be one that maybe seems a better fit for your organization. But maybe the best thing to do is to find out who is going to be in charge of implementing these procedures and activities, and just getting in touch with them and see kind of what they're thinking and how you can assist. So we talked a little bit about agency risk profile, and this is from page 13 of A-123. And it sort of goes through some of the benefits and opportunities created by the development of an agency risk profile. The first thing, it encourages open and candid conversations about risks facing an organization at all levels. I think from our perspective as ethics officials, there's a lot of sort of reputational concern that we may have. There's always risk posed by employees in those confidential filing positions. And by participating in our risk management activities, we'll be able to raise these risks as organizational risks and discuss them in the context of all the other risks that are faced by our organization. It facilitates ranking of risk priorities. So we talked a little bit about ranking models, but by creating a risk profile, and a necessary step for implementing the risk profile is to rank and think about the risk priorities. And I think in our case, our role is probably going to be focused primarily on sort of subsets of risk. If you have a big contracting matter, the non-performance or inability to execute a big contract is a major risk maybe for an organization. And within that broader risk, there are some ethics elements. Conflicts of interest can pose obstacles to awarding successfully and implementing a contract. There are other ethics concerns when employees interact with contractors that could negatively affect the ability of the agency to get the maximum benefit from that contracting activity. So I think when we're looking at our agency's risks, we want to sort of see within the broad risk categories, are there places where there is sort of ethics risk that maybe our senior leadership doesn't see because they're not expert in the laws and regulations that we implement, and where that exists, we can bring that to their attention so that we can participate in the risk mitigation activities and take steps to make sure that those risks aren't realized. Another nice thing that this does is it captures the reasons and for decisions made about risk tolerances. So there's no perfect system that can prevent any risk from ever being realized, and even if there were, I'm not sure we'd want to pursue it. But by looking at things across the organization, it requires us to make accountable decisions. It creates a framework in which there is accountability in the decision-making process, and where there are decisions made to take on risk, an opportunity to sort of document and support those decisions. And I think this is another area where we have some expertise and experience. If you've ever done a Subpart E authorization, that is a determination to take on risk. You say, yeah, I think there's risk to the reputation of the agency, or we might be criticized here, but we really need to move forward with this activity, and the need to get the work done outweighs that possible concern. And the reason we document and the reasons for these decisions is so that if the criticism does occur, we can say, hey, it's not that we didn't think about it, it's that we looked at it, and here's how we considered it, and here's how we decided what to do. So I think that process that we're familiar with will be brought to the broader decision-making in your organizations. And that's another area that we can help to implement and maybe support. Sort of leads into the second one, the recording of the way in which it is decided to address risk. So if it's decided that, we're going to take this measure, we think that's sufficient to mitigate a risk, we have a way to document that and sort of justify the proportionality of that response, and allows leadership to understand the overall risk profile and how their areas of particular responsibility fit into it. I think this is another opportunity for us as an ethics program, because we are not alone in our responsibility for the ethical health of our organizations. We talk a lot about leadership support, and I think this gives us an opportunity to talk concretely about what that means. Does that mean being sure that ethics considerations are baked into processes? Does it mean that we remind staff and team members periodically about their obligations? So we can discuss concretely the role of people at all levels of the organizations to help with these kinds of risks. And also we have this ability to review and regularly monitor the risks. This is something else that you might be familiar with when we come out and conduct a program review, or you conduct a self-assessment. That's what we're doing. We're reviewing and monitoring the health of our risk mitigation strategies. So this is another area that you may have some experience that you can bring to bear. But those also are useful inputs. And in fact, A-123 specifically mentions your own internal program review activities, as well as OGE program review reports, as good inputs to consider when implementing internal control and enterprise risk management activities. So that's kind of the really broad view of what's put forth here in A-123, with a specific emphasis on risk profiling. So what should we do? What should we do as an ethics program to support these risks? And we've talked about some of these things already. And I think one of the places that we're very excited about starting is the area of reputational risk. This is something that OMB and some of the other stakeholders in the performance community are very interested in. In the government, we're in kind of a unique situation where in some ways risks to the reputation of the agency are among the largest. They can be the most detrimental to our ability to carry out our functions. And A-123 discusses reputational risk on page 16. And I'll give you guys just a minute to read through the sort of discussion of reputational risk. So here we sort of have an acknowledgement that injury to an agency's reputation can actually materially impair its ability to carry out its mission and key functions, and that we should consider this as part of our entire risk profile as an organization. And this is, I think, a very clear area where the ethics program can contribute both to risk identification, but also to risk mitigation. This is something that we are very experienced doing in the area of impartiality. When we make determinations about even things like widely attended gatherings, we are considering the potential harm to the reputation of the agency or the possibility for criticism against the need of the government to engage in its work. So I think this is an area that we're happy to see in the circular, and is also a place where we as ethics officials can make the case that this is an area that we're uniquely qualified or to participate in the management of reputational risk. We can also help in the area of internal controls and risk response. You might not think of your financial disclosure programs as internal controls or risk responses, but I think when we look at the definitions and the principles that animate those programs, we find that indeed that is a pretty good fit. And in fact, when we look at the Green Book components and principles of internal controls, and the Green Book is the audit manual that the Government Accountability Office uses, the first principle that goes into the control environment is a commitment to integrity and ethical values. So if you get the question, why are you here? What does the ethics office have to contribute to these activities, to the internal control environment? Well, the first principle that GAO sets forth is demonstrating a commitment to integrity and ethical values. And we are also well situated to make suggestions about how our organizations can do that. What kind of management activities support integrity and ethical values? What kind of program activities support a commitment to integrity and ethical values? So, if we have those requests, those ideas about how our leadership can support the ethical culture on organizations, they are well supported as part of the A-123 internal control section. We can also participate as a member of our Senior Management Council. So the Senior Management Council is there to assess and monitor deficiencies in internal controls. They also have a role in the enterprise risk management area. And OMB, again, has not specifically named the people who must be part of the Senior Management Council, but they do give some suggestions. And it says here, a Senior Management Council may include the Chief Financial Officer, the Chief Human Capital Officer, the Chief Information Officer, Chief Information Security Officer, the Chief Acquisition Officer, Senior Agency Official for Privacy, and Designated Agency Ethics Official, as well as the Performance Improvement Officer and managers of programs and offices. So OMB is suggesting to us here that there is probably a role for an ethics official on the Senior Management Council. And this is another opportunity that we can ask to be invited to participate in these risk management and internal control activities. So I'd encourage you to take a look at pages 23 and 24 and the sections that surround them to think about ways that you as an ethics official might contribute to your agency's activities. We talked a little bit about risk profiles, and I'd like just to walk through quickly a model that is shared in the playbook. So the playbook that was put together by the CFO Council and GSA includes some models that agencies might use for creating their risk profile. And I don't want to look at the specific risks that are included in this profile, but the categories that they suggest we think about. So if your agency were creating a risk profile, something you might start with is identifying the risk. And this could be any number of things. A risk of significant turnover at the leadership level is a risk. Engaging in a large contracting activity presents a risk. Whatever the risk might be within your organization, we're going to sort of start to list those. And then the next thing we do is we do an inherent assessment. What risks are produced by that activity? If the risks are realized, is the impact going to be high, low, or medium? And is the likelihood high, low, or medium? So we get a sense of how likely the risk is and also how big the potential consequences might be. Then we move on to risk mitigation. So what are we going to do to help manage these risks? And I think this is an area where the ethics program, in the places where there's legal or reputational risk concerned, can help to address those concerns through our program activities, through training, through advice and counsel, through financial disclosure, through simply consulting with program leaders about possible ethics concerns. And then we think about, where do we think that leaves us as an organization? Do we think that we still have significant risk? And if we do, or even if we don't, we document that and then propose any subsequent actions to help mitigate that residual risk, indicate who's responsible for it, and then finally put it in a proposed action category. So your agencies might not use this model. There are, I think, 3 or 4 of them that are suggested, but this one has kind of the categories and the process. So the idea is to identify risks, figure out how big they are, figure out what we're going to do to help address them, see what sort of risk we have left after taking those mitigation steps, and then see if there's anything further we need to do as organizations to address that residual risk, and find out who's going to be responsible for making sure all this happens. So what are the next steps? This was only published 3 weeks ago, and we thought it was really important to communicate with the ethics community quickly about how you can begin participating. So we understand from OMB and the performance community that agencies are going to start holding meetings and identifying points of contact in the coming weeks and months. So through the rest of the summer and early fall, at least the agencies covered by the CFO Act are expected to be underway and starting to think about this, at least by identifying an agency point of contact for enterprise risk management, and then to begin to assemble the key stakeholders. So what can we do now to begin participating in our agencies? The first thing you can do is identify the enterprise risk management point of contact at your agency. If you're at an agency, or the DAO or ADAO or a headquarters ethics official at an agency covered by the Chief Financial Officers Act, a place to start might be in your CFO office. So you might reach out to someone in the CFO office and let them know that you're interested in participating, that you have taken a look at the circular, and you can ask to be either included or briefed in any meetings that they're going to have. OMB has suggested that we might be good participants in the Senior Management Council, so we could suggest that we understand that that was a suggestion and that we think, in fact, we can participate there. We can think about the tools our program can contribute to agency enterprise risk management. Once we start discussing with the performance and financial folks at our agencies the risk management in general, the question is what can we contribute? What kinds of tools does the ethics office and ethics program offer to help mitigate risks? We can also contribute to agency risk profiles. The first agency risk profile is going to be due to OMB in June of 2017, but for the larger agencies, to my understanding, OMB would like us to start on those as soon as possible. And as ethics officials, we can contribute there. We can help to identify legal risk in the area of ethics. We can help identify reputational risk. And if there are risks inherent in our own programs, we can bring those up the chain and put them on the table as possible program risks. I think this is the most exciting area. The last thing we can do is to use that agency risk profile to help us target our ethics activities. If we sort of know what the biggest challenges facing our agencies are in the next 3 months, 6 months, year, we can better target our training. We can conduct more responsive financial disclosure reviews. We can conduct awareness activities aimed at encouraging people to seek advice and counsel about particular kinds of work. So kind of having this document that profiles all of the agency's risks will allow us to better deploy and more efficiently deploy the resources of our ethics programs. Just want to go over quickly some of the upcoming dates and deadlines that are set forth in A-123. And this document goes on further into the future. So if you're interested in all of this, take a look at page 20 of the circular, and you'll see the ERM implementation approach. OMB has asked agencies to do this as soon as practicable. So they'd like folks to get started right away, but definitely before June. And agencies are encouraged to develop an approach to implement our enterprise risk management. And I think this is one of the opportunities for us as ethics officials, is that we can contribute to the development of that approach to make sure that ethics concerns are included, and also to make sure that our contributions are able to and are included in our agency's ability to respond to risk. So that's sort of ongoing as of the publication of the circular. The next big deadline is going to be June 2nd, 2017, which is when agencies must complete their initial risk profiles. So if you sort of work backwards from there, you can see that these activities are going to have to get underway pretty quickly in order to meet that deadline. We also have, I think, a presidential transition coming up, which is going to be another challenge resource-wise. So I think agencies are going to be starting to look at this really, really quickly. And then integration with management evaluation and internal controls, they're looking at a year from now. They'd like to have that first step of maturity in place at agencies. So something that you can do immediately is to find out who your enterprise risk management point of contact is in your agency. It'll probably be someone in your chief financial office or someone in your performance office. So if you have a chief performance officer or your budget office, those might be good places to start. So that's a brief overview of the critical parts of A-123 to the ethics community, as well as the playbook. I hope that this has been interesting to you and that you will at least take some time to sort of browse those two documents and see where you can fit in, and then to reach out to others in your organization to find out how your programs can support your agency's enterprise risk management functions and contribute to your internal control environment. So I think we have a couple of minutes left, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments. And again, if you're on the phone, feel free just to take your phone off mute and shut out. And those on the Hangout, if you just type in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. All right, well, I don't have any questions on the Hangout or on the phone, but thank you all very much for joining us. Again, if you're an ethics official at an agency with an established enterprise risk management program, please reach out to me or your desk officer, because we'd really be interested in learning from your experience. If you're interested in getting together with colleagues and thinking about ways that the ethics program can support enterprise risk management, we do have those 2 workshops coming up. So if you're interested, or this presentation has made you interested, please feel free to register for those. And if you have other ideas or experiences, please do share them with us, because this is all new for all of us, and we will all be better prepared if we work together. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope we will see you next Thursday for our update to Subpart F presentation. Until next time, I'm Patrick Shepard.